The sound of his laughter, sharp and dismissive, echoed in the cavernous living room, each note a fresh stab to my already fractured resolve. Mark, my husband, sat sprawled on the oversized leather sofa, a tumbler of amber liquid in his hand, his eyes glinting with an amusement so cruel it stole the air from my lungs. An online shop? From the garage? Sarah, darling, are you quite well? His voice, usually a smooth instrument of corporate power, was laced with mockery, dripping with contempt for the woman who dared to dream beyond his gilded cage. It was the moment my world tilted, the precise instant I knew there was no going back. If you've ever felt that crushing weight of being told your dreams are worthless, that you're nothing without someone else, then you know this pain. Stick with me, because this isn't just my story. It's a testament to what happens when you refuse to be diminished. That moment, etched into my memory, was the precise turning point, the spark that ignited a fire I never knew I possessed. For years, I had been Sarah Wells, the trophy wife, the silent partner in Mark's opulent life. My days revolved around charity galas, interior decorators, and maintaining a facade of effortless perfection. But beneath the surface, a quiet rebellion had been brewing. It started subtly, with late-night sketches of botanical patterns, then furtive online searches for ethically sourced fabrics and sustainable wood. My dream was Ember and Bloom, an online shop dedicated to unique, handcrafted home decor that told a story, objects imbued with soul, a stark contrast to the mass-produced luxury Mark surrounded himself with. It was my secret, my sanctuary, a world where my creativity wasn't stifled by his judgment or dismissed as a frivolous hobby. I remembered the afternoon I first dared to voice it. The sun was streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air, a metaphor for the stagnant particles of my life. Mark was engrossed in a financial report, his brow furrowed in concentration. I took a deep breath, the words catching in my throat. Mark, I've been thinking, I want to start my own business, an online shop for home goods. He didn't even look up. That's nice, dear. Something to keep you busy. His dismissal was a familiar sting, but this time it fueled my resolve. No, Mark, I mean a real business. I'm leaving you. I'm going to do this for real. From the garage. That was when he laughed. Not a chuckle, not a polite titter, but a full-bellied, condescending guffaw that shook his broad shoulders. He finally looked at me, his eyes wide with feigned disbelief, then narrowing into a sneer. The garage? Our garage? Sarah, you're adorable. Do you even know how to run a business? Do you know anything about supply chains? Marketing? Do you even know how to change a light bulb in that dusty old space? He took a long sip of his drink, swirling the ice. You've never worked a day in your life. You're entirely dependent on me. What? Are you going to sell knitted coasters and pretend it's artisanal? He waved a dismissive hand. Don't be ridiculous. This is just another one of your fleeting whims. It'll pass, like your brief fascination with pottery or that disastrous attempt at gourmet cooking. His words, meant to deflate, instead ignited a furious heat in my chest. He saw me as a child, an accessory, incapable of anything beyond his shadow. My hands, which he often admired for their delicate grace, clenched into fists. He didn't know how many nights I'd spent poring over business plans, how many hours I'd dedicated to perfecting my designs, how much of my soul I'd poured into this quiet rebellion. His laughter, echoing in the opulent silence, was the final insult. It was the sound of my gilded cage slamming shut. But this time, I had the key. No, Mark, I said, my voice surprisingly steady despite the tremor in my hands. It's not a whim, it's my life, and I'm taking it back. I didn't wait for his response. Turning on my heel, I walked out of the living room, the Persian rug feeling like quicksand beneath my feet. Every step was a declaration. I walked past the imported marble countertops in the kitchen, the gleaming stainless steel appliances, the very symbols of the life he expected me to be grateful for. My mind raced, not with panic, but with a newfound clarity. I had to get out, now. I moved to our bedroom, a space that had once felt intimate but now suffocated me with its luxurious emptiness. The walk-in closet, filled with designer clothes he'd picked out, seemed to mock me. I didn't even glance at them. Instead, I pulled a small, worn duffel bag from the back of a shelf. It was the bag I used for weekend trips to visit my sister, a bag that held memories of a simpler, freer time. I grabbed a few essentials, a change of clothes, my old journal, the worn-out sketchbook filled with the nascent designs for Ember and Bloom. My fingers fumbled with my phone, quickly transferring the last of my meager personal savings from our joint account to a new, secret one I'd opened weeks ago, just in case. It wasn't much, barely enough to cover a month's rent on a cheap studio, but it was mine. As I zipped the bag, my gaze fell on the framed photo on my bedside table, Mark and me, smiling on our wedding day, a picture of perfect happiness. His arm was around me, possessive, but I hadn't noticed it then. Now I saw it for what it was, a cage. Without a second thought, I picked up the frame and turned it face down. The sharp click of the plastic against the wood was surprisingly satisfying. I took one last look around the room, at the king-sized bed, the expensive art, the life I was abandoning. There was no regret, only a fierce, burning determination. I heard Mark's voice from the living room, calling out, "Sarah, don't be dramatic. We can talk about this." His tone was still dismissive, but there was a hint of annoyance, a crack in his smug facade. He expected me to come back, to capitulate, to be the obedient wife. But that woman was gone. She had been laughed out of existence. I walked purposefully through the hallway, past the grand staircase, toward the front door. My heart pounded. A drumbeat of freedom. I didn't glance back, not at the opulent house, not at the life I was leaving behind. The doorknob felt cold in my hand, but the prospect of stepping out into the unknown was electrifying. I pushed it open. The evening air, cool and crisp, hit my face, a welcome shock after the stifling warmth inside. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs with possibility, and stepped out onto the polished stone path. The sound of Mark's laughter, now faint and distant, was finally drowned out by the thunder of my own defiant heartbeat. I closed the door softly behind me, leaving the gilded cage and him in my past. The streetlights cast long shadows, and the future was a blank canvas, terrifyingly empty but exhilaratingly vast. I had nothing but a duffel bag, a few dollars, and a dream, but for the first time in years, I felt truly alive. My journey, the one he scoffed at, had just begun. The evening air bit through my jacket as I clutched my small duffel bag, the weight of my past life shedding with every step away from Mark's perfectly manicured lawn. My meager savings were my lifeline. I needed a space, cheap and inconspicuous, somewhere no one would look for me. 2 days of pounding pavement, my feet aching, led me to it, a forgotten, oil-stained garage behind a defunct auto shop on the outskirts of town. The landlord, Gus, a gruff man with calloused hands, squinted at me. "50 a week, cash, no questions," he grunted, the words a lifeline. The smell of grease and damp concrete filled the air as I pushed open the creaking metal door. Dust motes danced in the slivers of light cutting through grimy windows. This was my headquarters, my sanctuary. I spent the first week scrubbing, painting, patching, my hands blistering, back screaming from the unaccustomed labor. I bought a cheap workbench, a few basic tools, and a single bare light bulb that cast long dancing shadows. My budget was razor thin. Every penny counted. I ate instant noodles and slept on an old army cot I found discarded in the corner. The silence of the garage, broken only by distant sirens, was a welcome relief from Mark's patronizing voice. I started sketching designs, my mind buzzing with the vibrant patterns and textures I'd envisioned for Ember and Bloom. The first batch of raw materials, ethically sourced wood and hand-dyed fabrics, arrived. A surge of nervous excitement hit me. This was real. This was mine. No more hidden dreams, no more whispered ambitions, just the raw, undeniable truth of my own making. The weight was immense, but so was the thrill. My enthusiasm hit a brick wall. My first prototype, an intricately carved wooden trinket box, failed. The high-grade wood, advertised as perfect, kept splitting under the chisel. I adjusted technique, sharpened tools, even changed the garage temperature, but nothing worked. Each piece ended up ruined, splintered, and useless. My savings dwindled fast. I couldn't afford to waste materials. Panic clawed at my throat. Was Mark right? Was I truly incapable of building anything of value? I stared at the pile of ruined wood, despair tightening. Hours passed. I called the supplier, but they dismissed my concerns, blaming my inexperience. I felt the familiar sting of self-doubt creeping back, that insidious voice Mark had cultivated. Then defiance ignited. No, not this time. I wouldn't let faulty wood define my future, wouldn't let his laughter be the last sound in my ears. I picked up a splintered piece, examining the grain. The problem wasn't my technique, it was the wood itself. Too dry, too brittle, improperly treated. I remembered an old article about wood curing, a long shot but my only option. I spent a frantic evening researching online forums and dusty library books. The solution: rehydration. I found an old galvanized tub in the garage, cleaned it, filled it with water. Piece by painstaking piece, I submerged the entire batch of wood, weighing it down with bricks. I waited, checking every few hours, my breath held tight with each inspection. After 3 agonizing days, the wood felt different, supple, resilient. I pulled a piece out, wiped it dry, and approached it with my sharpest chisel. The blade slid through the grain like butter, carving clean, smooth lines. Exhilaration washed over me. I hadn't just fixed a problem. I had learned a fundamental aspect of my craft. I started working around the clock, fueled by strong coffee and fierce determination. The first trinket boxes, imperfect but beautiful, emerged from my workshop. Each one was a testament to my resilience, a silent scream against Mark's derision. They were mine. And they were ready. Selling was another hurdle. I started small, listing them on a fledgling online marketplace, posting grainy photos. Weeks passed with no sales. Optimism waned, replaced by gnawing anxiety. I walked through local craft markets, observing, learning. I revised descriptions, improved photography, even invested in a cheap ring light. Then, one Tuesday morning, my phone chimed. An order. A single, small trinket box. The notification felt like a jolt of electricity. I danced around the garage, a triumphant, solitary celebration. More orders trickled in, slowly but steadily. Not enough to live on, but enough for materials, enough to keep the dream alive. I shipped each item myself, carefully packaging them, including a handwritten thank you note. Customers left glowing reviews, praising the unique designs and the quality. Pure validation. Around then, I started noticing unsettling details. A sleek black sedan parked down the street from the garage for hours, driver obscured by tinted windows. Coincidence, I told myself. Then, at the grocery store, I overheard 2 women. Mark's ex-wife. I heard she's trying to start some little craft business. One whispered condescendingly. In a garage, no less. Poor dear. The words hit me. Mark was talking, spreading rumors, trying to undermine me before I even had a chance. The black sedan reappeared days later, closer. I saw a flash of a phone camera. My stomach tightened. He wasn't just talking, he was watching. Mark's calculated surveillance fueled new resolve. He wouldn't break me. Not now. Not ever. I poured every ounce of energy into perfecting my designs, expanding my product line. My small collection of home decor, elegant candle holders, unique wall hangings, and, of course, the now perfected trinket boxes, began to gain a quiet following. I invested my meager profits into a better online presence, a simple but clean website. Then the email arrived at 2:17 a.m. I was hunched over a workbench, meticulously sanding a custom-designed wooden candle holder, the garage air thick with sawdust and the scent of beeswax. My phone, propped against a stack of shipping boxes, buzzed. It was a notification from Home and Hearth Living, the online publication I'd sent a desperate cold pitch to weeks ago. The subject line read, "Ember and Bloom, the artisan brand redefining home decor." My heart hammered. I clicked, the screen illuminating my tired face. There it was, a beautifully written feature, showcasing my work, my philosophy, even a small photo of me in the cluttered garage. The article ended with a direct link to my shop. I barely had time to read the last paragraph before my phone began to chime again, and again, and again. Order notifications flooded my inbox like a relentless tide. My website analytics dashboard, which usually showed a trickle of visitors, now spiked vertically, a red line shooting off the charts. Within an hour, I had more orders than I'd processed in the entire previous month. The viral breakthrough hit like a physical punch. I scrambled to fulfill the sudden surge, working 20-hour days, fueled by instant coffee and a terrifying mix of exhilaration and panic. The garage, once a cavernous space, quickly became a suffocating maze of raw materials, half-finished products, and mountains of packaging. My hands ached, my eyes burned, and exhaustion became a permanent resident in my bones. I slept on a worn sleeping bag next to the workbench, waking every few hours to the incessant ping of new orders. One morning, trying to label a particularly delicate ceramic vase, my hand cramped so badly I dropped it. The shatter echoed in the silent garage, a sharp, painful reminder of my limitations. I stared at the broken pieces, tears of frustration stinging my eyes. This wasn't sustainable. I needed help. I swallowed my pride, a bitter taste, and posted job openings for production assistants and a shipping coordinator on local online boards. The idea of trusting anyone else with Ember and Bloom, my fragile creation, terrified me. But the alternative was collapse. The first two hires, a retired carpenter named Arthur with gnarled, knowing hands, and a young, energetic student named Chloe, who was a whiz with spreadsheets and packaging, arrived a week later. Their presence instantly transformed the chaotic garage. Arthur took over the precision work, his experience evident in every smooth cut and perfectly aligned joint. Chloe, with her meticulous organization, brought order to the shipping madness. The rhythmic hum of their work filled the space, a symphony of progress. We quickly outgrew the garage. I found a small, slightly larger workshop space in an industrial park on the outskirts of the city. It was still humble, with chipped concrete floors and bare fluorescent lights, but it had more room, a dedicated shipping area, and most importantly, a separate office for me. Moving Ember and Bloom into its new home felt like a rebirth, a tangible symbol of our ascent. I remembered Mark's laughter, and a fierce, quiet satisfaction settled in my chest. He had no idea what I was building. One evening, while unwinding with a business podcast, the host began discussing the unexpected downturns in the luxury home decor market. Nexus Corp, once a titan in the high-end furnishing sector, reported its third consecutive quarter of declining sales, the host announced. Analysts attribute it to a general market shift towards artisanal, ethically sourced goods, a trend Nexus has been slow to adapt to. I froze, the name Nexus Corp echoing in my ears. Mark's company. I knew he dealt in high-end, mass-produced decor, but I hadn't connected it to my own niche. I listened intently as the host detailed Nexus's struggles, their stock price plummeting, shareholders growing restless. There was no mention of Ember and Bloom, of course. My brand was still too small for their radar, but a chilling realization dawned on me. Ember and Bloom, with its focus on unique, handcrafted pieces and transparent sourcing, was exactly the kind of brand the podcast described as disrupting the market. We were indirectly chipping away at Mark's empire, one candle holder, one vase, one customer at a time. The thought sent a jolt of power through me. A few days later, a new supplier I was vetting, a small family-run mill that provided me with sustainable wood, mentioned it. "You know, Ms. Wells," the owner said, his voice crackling over the phone. "It's funny how things change. For years, Nexus Corp was our biggest client for this type of reclaimed timber. Now, your orders for Ember and Bloom dwarf theirs. You're single-handedly keeping us afloat." The confirmation was stark, undeniable. My little garage dream was a force, quietly reshaping the very market Mark had dominated. He was still attributing his losses to general economic trends, blind to the true, personal storm brewing on his horizon. That evening, as I reviewed the production schedule, an email landed in my inbox. The sender was Stratton and Reed Consulting, a name synonymous with high-stakes corporate mergers and acquisitions. The subject line, "Inquiry regarding Ember and Bloom, strategic partnership opportunity." My breath hitched. This wasn't just another order. This was a direct, formal approach from a major player, a sign that Ember & Bloom was no longer just a small business. It was a recognized entity, a potential game changer. I opened the email, my finger hovering over the reply button, knowing that this inquiry, whatever it entailed, would irrevocably alter the trajectory of my life and the future of Ember & Bloom. The email from the high-profile business consultant, Synergy Solutions, sat open on my screen, a formal invitation to discuss a strategic partnership opportunity. My gut clenched. It felt too big, too sudden, even for Ember & Bloom's recent growth spurt. I typed a quick reply, agreeing to a preliminary video call, my fingers hovering over the send button. The previous month had been a whirlwind of expansion. The viral moment had transformed my humble garage operation into a full-blown workshop in an industrial park, buzzing with a small but dedicated team. We had moved from struggling to keep up with demand to actively seeking ways to scale. Still, the idea of a strategic partnership from a firm like Synergy Solutions, known for handling multi-million-dollar mergers, felt like stepping into a different league entirely. The video call with Synergy Solutions' lead consultant, a sharp-suited woman named Ms. Davies, happened 2 days later. Her demeanor was all business, her words precise. She spoke of market trends, consumer shifts, and the disruptive potential of brands like mine. She painted a picture of a major retail player, struggling to adapt, losing market share to agile, ethically sourced brands. She didn't name names, but her descriptions of their legacy infrastructure and outdated supply chains sounded vaguely familiar, like a ghost of a past life. I felt a chill, a flicker of recognition, but pushed it down. My focus remained on Ember & Bloom. Miss Davies explained that this struggling company was looking for a lifeline, a fresh, innovative brand to integrate into their portfolio, and Ember & Bloom had been identified as the perfect fit. She emphasized confidentiality, the sensitivity of the situation. I listened, nodded, and asked probing questions about their proposed partner's current market standing and why they were so desperate. Her answers were vague, citing competitive intelligence, but the underlying message was clear. This company was in deep trouble. A week later, Synergy Solutions sent over a comprehensive proposal, complete with market analysis and a detailed profile of the target company for partnership. My eyes scanned the document, my heart hammering against my ribs. The company's name, splashed across the executive summary, made the air leave my lungs in a rush. Nexus Corp. My vision blurred for a moment. Nexus Corp. Mark's company, the same monolithic entity he had boasted about, the one he claimed would one day swallow up all competition. Now it was the one being swallowed, or at least desperately trying to avoid that fate. The report detailed their plummeting stock prices, their failed expansion attempts, their desperate attempts to pivot to online sales, all of which had been utterly outmaneuvered by nimble, niche brands. Brands like mine. A grim satisfaction settled over me, cold and precise. It wasn't just a coincidence that Nexus Corp was struggling. The report made it explicitly clear that Ember & Bloom's success in the home decor and ethically sourced goods market had directly siphoned off a significant portion of Nexus Corp's customer base. My small, garage-born dream had unknowingly become a direct competitor, a thorn in the side of his empire. The next page contained a brief bio of Nexus Corp's CEO, complete with a recent, strained-looking photo of Mark. His usual arrogant smirk was replaced by a tight, forced smile that didn't reach his eyes. His bio listed his strategic vision and unwavering leadership, but the context of the report made those words sound like a cruel joke. He was the one who had laughed me out of the house. He was the one whose company was now teetering on the brink, and he was the one looking to my company for salvation. A wave of raw, potent emotion washed over me. Not anger, but a profound, unshakable sense of vindication. I took a deep, steadying breath, my hands gripping the edge of my desk until my knuckles were white. The consultants had not mentioned Mark by name in our previous calls, only the company. This was their strategic reveal, or perhaps they assumed I already knew. Either way, their careful omission only confirmed his embarrassment and desperation. He was trying to negotiate a lifeline from his ex-wife, the garage shop dreamer. without acknowledging their past. I called Ms. Davies back an hour later. My voice was calm, controlled, betraying none of the turmoil inside. "I've reviewed the proposal," I stated, keeping my tone neutral. "I'm willing to take a meeting to discuss the terms." She sounded pleased, almost relieved. We set a date for the following week. My mind immediately shifted into overdrive. This wasn't just a business meeting. It was a confrontation, a reckoning 5 years in the making. I spent the next few days immersing myself in every detail of Ember and Bloom's operations, finances, and future projections. I reviewed every clause of the divorce settlement, every contract we had ever signed, searching for any leverage, any forgotten detail that might be relevant. I even found an old photo of Mark and me from our early marriage, his arm around me, a genuine smile on his face. I tore it in half, then shredded it, the action a small, satisfying release of residual pain. I practiced my negotiation points, anticipating every possible angle Mark or his team might take. I drafted a list of non-negotiable terms, focusing not just on financial gain, but on ethical sourcing, employee welfare, and creative control, the very values Mark had always scoffed at. I wanted to be ready, not just to protect Ember and Bloom, but to reclaim my narrative, to stand tall against the man who had tried to diminish me. The day of the meeting arrived. I dressed in a tailored, deep emerald green power suit, a deliberate choice to project strength and calm. My team had reserved a private conference room at a neutral, upscale business center downtown. I arrived early, settled into the plush chair at the head of the long mahogany table, and arranged my notes, my laptop open, displaying Ember and Bloom's latest sales figures. The room was silent, save for the hum of the air conditioning. Each tick of the clock felt amplified, building the tension. The door finally opened, and Ms. Davies entered first, followed by 2 other Synergy Solutions representatives. Then he walked in. Mark. He looked older, his face etched with new lines of stress, his expensive suit somehow looking less sharp than before. His eyes, once so dismissive, scanned the room, landing on me. For a moment he froze, a flicker of shock, then recognition, and finally a dawning, terrible realization spread across his face. Our eyes locked across the polished table, the silence stretching, heavy with unspoken history and the weight of our transformed roles. The air in the spacious conference room thickened the moment Mark's eyes locked onto mine. His carefully constructed facade, the one he'd worn for years, fractured instantly. Disbelief, then a dawning, sickening realization contorted his features. His jaw tightened, and his hand, which had been reaching for the chair, dropped to his side. He didn't speak, but his silence screamed louder than any shout. The 2 Nexus Corp executives who had accompanied him shifted uncomfortably, sensing the sudden, inexplicable tension. I remained seated, my posture straight, a faint, almost imperceptible smile playing on my lips. My own team, consisting of Sarah, my head of operations, and Liam, my lead designer, sat beside me, their expressions unreadable, but their support a tangible force in the room. I had briefed them only generally, about a potential, challenging partnership, but not about the personal history. Mark finally moved, pulling out a chair opposite me, his movements stiff and jerky. He avoided my gaze, focusing instead on the polished conference table. His face, usually ruddy with self-importance, was now pale. He cleared his throat, a dry, raspy sound. "Sarah," he managed, his voice barely above a whisper. He corrected himself immediately, forcing a more professional tone. "Ms. Wells, thank you for taking this meeting." My head of operations, Sarah, leaned forward, about to introduce me, but I raised a hand, stopping her. My gaze never left Mark. "No need for formalities, Mark," I said, my voice clear and steady, devoid of the tremor I might have felt a year ago. "We know each other." He flinched, as if struck. His executives exchanged bewildered glances. Mark finally met my eyes, a flicker of desperation in their depths. "Indeed," he mumbled, then quickly tried to pivot. "So, as you know, Nexus Corp is a leader in the retail sector, and we've been very impressed with Ember and Bloom's rapid growth." He reached for a sleek presentation tablet, his hands visibly shaking. "We believe there's a synergistic opportunity here. A partnership could benefit both our companies immensely." He began to swipe through slides, a rehearsed pitch about market share, distribution channels, and brand recognition, but his words were hollow, lacking his usual bombast. He was trying to sell me on a future he no longer controlled, using a script that failed to acknowledge the present reality. I let him finish, watching his forced smiles and nervous gestures. When he finally stopped, the silence that followed was deafening. My team looked at me, waiting. "A partnership," I echoed, my voice soft, almost thoughtful. "That's an interesting proposition, Mark, especially coming from Nexus Corp." I paused, letting my words hang in the air. "Do you remember, Mark, a little over a year ago, when I told you about my idea for Ember and Bloom, about starting a small online shop, selling unique, ethically sourced home decor?" He swallowed hard, his face paling further. His gaze darted to his executives, then back to me, trapped. I believe I recall a conversation," he stammered. His earlier confidence completely evaporated. "You recall a conversation," I repeated, my voice still calm, but with an edge that cut through the pretense. "What I recall, Mark, is standing in our living room, telling you I was leaving to pursue this dream, and your response, your exact words, in fact. You laughed, Mark. You laughed out loud. You told me it was a hobby for bored housewives, a delusional fantasy, and that I'd be crawling back within weeks." His executives shifted uncomfortably, their eyes wide. Mark stammered, trying to interrupt. "Sarah, that was a misunderstanding, a different time." "A different time indeed," I agreed, a genuine, mirthless smile now on my face. "A time when you believed your massive retail company was unshakable. A time when you dismissed my ambition as a joke." I leaned forward, my voice dropping slightly but gaining in power. "Now, your company, Nexus Corp, is hemorrhaging market share. Your stock is plummeting. Your shareholders are in revolt, and you are here, Mark, desperately trying to secure an exclusive partnership with the delusional fantasy you laughed at." His face was a mask of defeat. He couldn't deny it. "We've faced unforeseen market shifts," he admitted, his voice barely audible. "Ember and Bloom's innovative approach, it's exactly what Nexus needs to stabilize, to survive." He finally looked at me, and in his eyes I saw genuine desperation, a plea I never thought I'd witness. "Sarah, please, Nexus is on the brink. This partnership, it's our last chance." I watched him, the man who had dismissed me, ridiculed my dreams, now begging for a lifeline. The power dynamic had flipped so completely it was almost dizzying. But this wasn't about revenge. It was about defining my future. "I've built Ember and Bloom from nothing," I stated, my voice firm. "Every piece, every design, every ethical sourcing decision was born from my vision, from my sweat and tears. It's not just a brand. It's the embodiment of everything you told me I couldn't be." He nodded, his head bowed. "I understand that now." "Good," I said, "because if there is any synergy to be found, it will be on my terms. Complete creative control, Mark, not just for design, but for ethical sourcing standards across any product line associated with Ember and Bloom. A non-negotiable 70% share of profits from any joint venture or licensing agreement, and a public statement from Nexus Corp acknowledging Ember and Bloom's unparalleled innovation and market leadership, specifically crediting its founder." His executives gasped. Mark looked up, his eyes wide. 70%? And a public statement? "Sarah, that's unprecedented. Our shareholders, your shareholders are staring at bankruptcy, Mark," I countered, cutting him off. "These are my terms. Take them or leave them. Ember and Bloom will continue to thrive, with or without Nexus Corp. We have other offers, better offers, from companies that value true partnership, not just a rescue operation." The truth of my words hung heavy. He had no leverage. He knew it. He looked from me to his executives, then back to me. A long, agonizing silence stretched. Finally, he closed his eyes, then opened them, a deep sigh escaping him. "We'll need to discuss this internally," he said, his voice flat. "But I believe we can make this work." I offered a small, knowing smile. "I believe you will." I rose from my chair, My team will send over the detailed proposal this afternoon. I expect your signed letter of intent by end of day tomorrow. Otherwise, the offer is off the table." He nodded, defeated. As I walked past him, leading my team out of the conference room, I felt a lightness I hadn't known in years. I had faced the ghost of my past, the mockery, the doubt, and transformed it into my greatest strength. The partnership with Nexus Corp, on my terms, was finalized the next day. The press release, detailing Ember and Bloom's pioneering vision and unparalleled market impact, was published globally. Mark's name was notably absent from any direct praise, swallowed by the corporate language. Nexus Corp regained some stability, but it was clear to everyone that Ember and Bloom was the driving force, a beacon of innovation that had pulled a titan from the brink. Ember and Bloom continued its meteoric rise, expanding into new markets, its ethical practices becoming a benchmark for the industry. I invested in sustainable manufacturing, partnered with artisan communities worldwide, and built a brand that stood for integrity and beauty. My garage, once a symbol of humble beginnings, was now a legendary part of our origin story, inspiring countless others. Months later, I stood in the flagship Ember and Bloom store, a vast, airy space filled with the warm glow of our lamps and the subtle scent of our handcrafted diffusers. I watched customers admire the products, their faces alight with appreciation. I remembered Mark's laughter, sharp and dismissive. It no longer stung. It was a distant echo, a reminder of the fire it had ignited within me. I hadn't just built a successful company, I had built a life, on my own terms, filled with purpose and true fulfillment. I was the architect of my own empire, and it was glorious.